Of Webflow here. Can we first see how many of you have used Webflow before? Good, so we got a lot of new users, which is great. So I'm going to do a quick demo of actually getting into the designer, and Penny and Maggie did a good introduction for me. So we'll move on to getting started in the platform. You've already seen at least a screenshot of the designer and the editor, which are the two different modes inside Webflow, two different interfaces. And we'll look at the Webflow marketplace, which contains all of the templates, which are basically pre-built sites, pre-built layouts that you can use to create your own website. So that would be the templates, and then also the UI kits and the industry-specific templates. So usually out of the thousands of templates that are on the marketplace, you can find one that would work for your business or for your client. That's also a good starting point if you just want to get into Webflow and see how it works. So we'll break this down into three separate parts. We have the design phase, which generally, as Penny mentioned, would start with Figma or XD or however you do your designs. And some people still use Photoshop for some reason. But the second phase would be the build. And this is where we're actually going to build it out in Webflow. And in many cases, you can actually skip the design phase and go straight into Webflow, whether you're building from scratch or building from a template. The third part we'll go over is publishing your actual site. So getting it live on the internet, getting connected to your domain name. I won't go into all the specifics, but I'll just show you the interface for doing that. This is the template marketplace. So you'll find a bunch of different categories and a bunch of different templates. Some are free, some are paid. It's a good starting point to get a feel for it. Now we'll go into the Webflow Designer. So when you first start up your project, you'll be offered to do a blank site or a template. So I'll switch over to that now. Create a new site, and I will duplicate the screen. Okay, so here's that interface. So for this example, if you're very new to Webflow and you just want to play around with the interface, probably best to go with the template option. You'll see some very basic ones. Webflow has had these three in there for many years, just very basic components. But we'll go into one that's a little bit more complicated, that looks a little bit more like a real website. It gives it a site name, my 5-star site. And now it's creating the site and getting it ready for us. So this interface you'll recognize from the last presenter. We'll zoom in a bit. On the right side, we have a style panel. On the left side is all of your different menus and settings and page controls. And on the top is where you'll switch between your different breakpoints. So the great thing about designing in Webflow, you don't have to load up the site every time to see your changes. You can just go through and see how it will look on all your different devices. This is how you'll start with a template. Generally, in the page section, you'll be able to see all the different options that the template creator has created for you. So in this case, they've given you 4 different product tour pages, a few different company pages. And what I like to do when I'm working on a template for a client or for my own project is usually look through all the pages and see which sections I like and which sections I want to use, and then copy those into the applicable page. So as you can see, whenever I hover over each item, you'll see the name of the item here, which is an H1, which is the largest heading. And then over in the style panel, you'll see the 2 different styles that are applied to that. So display heading and then text primary 1. So if you know about CSS, if you do have any web design experience, these are the same as CSS classes. If you're totally new to web development, that won't make any sense. So all you need to know is that you can modify all of the items that have these 2 styles applied to them. So if we change, for example, the size on this one, and we want to make that text smaller, make it 40 pixels, it will change all the text across all the pages in the whole site that have both display heading and text primary 1. If we want it to be, I'm just going to undo that. If we want it to be unique to this exact element, we might want to get rid of that text primary 1, and we'd create something like text primary 2. So now we can edit this without worrying about the rest of the pages changing. The The pages themselves are built mostly in the same way for all templates, where they're broken down into sections. And then the navigator will be a different way to visualize that. So let's look at the first section as an example. I'll zoom in a bit. So here's all the different sections on the page. As we click on them, it scrolls down to the applicable section. If we open up let's use the second one here. Inside each section is a container. And depending on how the original template developer set it up, they have different sizes or different wrappers. And now you'll be able to see, I'm just going to scale it out a little bit so you can see it easier. You'll be able to see when we hover over and click on each of these elements, it'll highlight that on the page so that you can look and see which style is inherited by that element. So for this one, within the section, all the way down you have the columns, and then when you're looking on the site, you can see clearly these are the 3 columns. You can click on each of them, or you can go back into the navigator and you can see each separate item in them. So that's a bit more technical look at how to make changes, but generally you can copy and paste sections that you want. You can rearrange them on the site. So if we like this one and we want to bring it down somewhere else, we can click and drag in the navigator. You can also move things around directly on the page, just sort of like how a drag and drop website builder would be. Webflow is quite a lot more advanced than most of the drag and drop services, but it still has the same concepts of moving things around on the page. So once you've changed all your text, which you can do by just double-clicking into each element, moving things around, you can check it out on each of the different mobile versions and preview the site. And you can see some of the animations load up there when I do the real preview, and I believe Maggie will be showing you more about animations. We'll switch over to the editor mode, which they covered briefly. It's the same exact layout, but as you can see, we don't have the style panel on the side, and we don't have nearly as many options here. We don't have the navigator or anything. So this is just a very basic way to go through all the pages, make changes to text, change where buttons link to. It's a much more simple way to use the template. So you can make changes that way, but generally we use this for a client or an end user, a marketing department in the company that's using the site. So often you'll find blog posts or team member pages, some dynamic content on the site, and that's where the CMS comes in. So I won't cover that in this demo as we don't have a lot of time, but I think Penny will go over the CMS collections and how you would add a blog or any sort of dynamic content to your site. So for the third part of this, we will show you how to publish the site. So once you've made all your changes, you've deleted the pages you don't want, you'll want to publish the site. So Webflow gives you, for development purposes for free, they give you this .webflow.io address, which you can publish to for free. And now you'll be able to see this live on the internet. And they will also walk you through the process of adding your own custom domain. So if you want to add a .com or connect it to your company's website. So here's that site. Here's the template we just created with any of the changes we made to it on that webflow.io staging address. And then if you're ready to put it into production, Webflow will walk you through. This is the Webflow dashboard inside the project settings. So you have all your general settings, site access, so you can add editors, you can publish it, and this is where you would add the hosting plan and the domain name. So they pretty much walk you through this upgrading from the free plan to the paid plan. And you'll want to check out all the other settings too, set up all your SEO, set up where your form submissions go to, and this is where some of the settings for the different apps and libraries will be as well. An important one for anybody getting started is probably the backups tab. You can restore at any time. Webflow takes automatic backups, I believe every 10 minutes or so while you're designing. So you can always restore or preview an old backup, so you don't have to worry about breaking something on the live site. I guess we'll take some questions now if anybody has questions specifically about Webflow. Yes, go ahead.
So I currently have a website hosted using Framework.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering what are the main benefits of Webflow compared to Framework?
Okay, good question. So he's asking Webflow versus Framer. I personally haven't used Framer, so I don't know specifically how it differs, but generally Framer's trying to catch up to Webflow or Webflow's trying to catch up to Framer with the same features. So I think they both have a similar design interface. I would say that Webflow probably has more third-party apps, more services you can connect it to, things that are built directly for Webflow, which we'll be showing, a few of the presenters will be showing later. I'm not sure if anyone else here is familiar with Framer. Maybe you can add your input. Probably not. Okay, Framer is another tool, basically a competitor of Webflow. So I would say try both of them. I'm not trying to discourage you from using Framer, but I do think depending on the scale of the project, what you're trying to do with it, Webflow might be a better option.
Yeah, it's just a landing page.
Okay, for just a landing page, I think they'll both. I wouldn't say one's better than the other for a static page. Yep.
How do you test for broken links?
Broken links. Okay. So you're saying if you have built a site and you forgot to link something or you link it to a page that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Okay, Webflow doesn't have that built in. You would have to use a third-party tool like SEMrush or one of the free services online to check for that. Inside the designer, there is an auditing option for the page, which gives you general things that you might need to check on before you publish the site, which I think they have moved it. They moved it somewhere. But anyway, there is an auditing option, which will show you if you forgot to add metadata or if you forgot to add an alt tag to an image. But I don't think it checks for broken links.
There is though.
There is? Okay.
Well, when you change your page link, so like say you sign up stuff, you're sending it to your dashboard page, but then you decide you want to change the dashboard URL. There is when you go to change the page slugs in the Webflow page editor, it will automatically set up redirects.
Yeah, good point.
Added right to the page. So if you go to change this to whatever,
yeah, say I changed it, there's an option right here. Permanently redirect. So that'll save you. And then in the dashboard, there's also an option for the 301 redirect, which it'll add automatically. So that's probably going to help you in most cases, but there is no programmatic way to check that. Okay, they moved it. I would show you that, but yeah, it doesn't specifically address links. There it is. So this in our case, the template's missing the alt text on images. We've skipped the heading level, which is not good for SEO, and it passed these two. So a lot of errors there. Good question. Yep.
For companies that have brand assets built in Figma or their design systems, so we skipped the first part where when the designer is actually using them for
yes.
right?
Yeah, we skipped the design part.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there a way to bring those brand assets, those design systems into Webflow? Because you obviously you don't want to create everything from scratch.
Yes. Good question.
Platform, right?
So Webflow has thought of this, and they noticed everyone was using, or many people were using Figma for their original design. So there's a Figma to Webflow plugin, which is created by the Webflow team. I believe it's still in beta. And right now they're updating it to specifically address brand assets and I don't remember what the system's called in Figma, basically where you set all your brand guide, right? So that'll update to Webflow. You can push it into Webflow, and then you can even copy those elements, and it'll try to match it to the existing styles that you have inside Webflow. So that I would definitely check that out if you're used to Figma. And if you're using Figma's auto layout, that's one of the requirements in order to actually have the layout translate into Webflow.
Right.
So, good question. Yep. Webflow doesn't have that built in aside from giving you total number of page views, but that's not super helpful. So there is dashboards and services that were specifically created for analytics on Webflow, but you can also use Google or any of the other ones that work globally. So no, you won't find anything specific to that. That would be something you could add to the marketplace or by adding custom code. Yep.
I saw that Webflow does the responsiveness of the layout automatically, or does the text also resize proportionally?
Yeah, so there's two different ways to address that. If you have your heading here in this example, so on the desktop view, which is what we're on right now, you'll see it's 72 pixels. If you use something like maybe vertical width of the page, oh, that's obviously too big. Vertical width of the page, now it will always be I can't make it smaller because I'm zoomed in, but basically it will grow and shrink with the page. But on each mobile version, you can set it specifically what size you want. So on this small version, which at the bottom you'll see iPhone, it's just all the standard sizes of common devices. you can change it specifically for this breakpoint. So you have 4 different options of changing it. So we might want to make it a little bigger on there. So it'll stay at 5 on desktop, and then on the smallest mobile, it'll switch to 7. Does that answer your question? Yes. Good. Do you mean if they have the content somewhere else? Okay. I would say, depending on the functionality, you will probably have to rebuild the functionality in Webflow. You can't directly bring something over. If you're talking strictly about content, like blog posts and page content, you can bring that in. But if there's a functionality on the site, like maybe something a WordPress plugin would create for you, you'd have to find something similar or an alternative on Webflow. Does that make sense? Right. You wouldn't use like WordPress and Webflow, most likely. Yeah, okay. Quickly, I would say that WordPress has a lot of technical challenges that don't come up with Webflow because of plugins, out-of-date plugins, things that don't work well together. Whereas if you compare it straight to Webflow extensions and anything in their marketplace, any apps, they're all tested by Webflow and they're all compatible with each other. And then there's third-party apps on top of that that you can sync everything into. So I'd say you're going to have a much easier time with Webflow and less having to deal with like bugs and trying to fix things. But definitely try it out.